Meeting to order, please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get started, just a side note. I have a real bad ear infection in the only ear I can hear out of, so if I'm reading something and you want to talk, just hit me side the head or something.
Which is the good ear?
Huh?
Which is the good ear?
Not the right one.
Yeah.
It's not the right one, huh?
Yeah, I can't hear nothing out of my left one.
Oh, so I have to hit you on a,
Yeah.
I'll be going like this all night.
Just throw something at me, I don't care. All right, the first item are the minutes from August 2nd.
Motion to accept the minutes from the August 2nd Advisory Committee regular meeting.
Motion made
Second.
and second. Any discussion?
Lee, does it help if you get input for the minutes?
Yeah, so I do want to thank you for that.
Okay.
It's definitely appreciated. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I know that I take, it's not my version or whatever, but you know, if the other points or whatever, it might help for you to kind of like shape or something.
Yep.
And because they're public record, I think that gives more an accurate public record of the meeting.
And it gives a couple perspectives too at the
Okay.
same time, yeah.
Excellent.
So I typically do things real time as we're taking, which is why I'm not quite as talkative.
Right.
But yeah, having
That's
someone else's.
exactly why I wanted to
Yeah.
be able to share that, so you know,
Yep.
it balances out the load.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you.
So if you're gonna look for comments, and, you know, which I don't mind, but could we get them before 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night, the night
So-
before? Not you,
No,
but
no,
Jeff
that,
sent them out.
no, that's totally on me.
No, well, no, I mean,
Because
you
he
sent them.
can't send out anything unless I send it to him.
No, but you sent it to him at 9:30 in the morning, and he didn't send it out until.
But he's not on
yeah, but-
email
Oh.
that early.
So if
He's
we
at
could
work.
try maybe a couple days just to give us, because you know, like with my work schedule.
Why don't we plan on by the Monday following the Thursday meeting? So no more than, what will that be, 3-4 days?
Well, whatever works for you. I
Yeah,
mean,
well, no, it's because you need time to read it. Fully agree. So again, I'll take that on myself to.
yeah, I just didn't want to put
At least
any
the
on there.
Monday before our Thursday meeting.
Yeah, but even I can get it up before then. Yeah. And honestly, it helps me because it's just one more thing off my plate at that point in time. Yeah. All right.
Okay, so you'll try the Monday,
Yep.
like this Monday coming up, and then,
Yeah, actually, these I will try to reconcile and get out to everyone tomorrow because I'll actually be away
Oh,
next
gotcha.
week. So yeah, that, and again, I'm going to do this real time. Anything can pass along if we do it by tomorrow morning. I'll reconcile that and get it out to
Yeah.
everyone tomorrow.
very good.
Okay.
Is there any issues with the minutes? They're good? All right, we have a motion and a second, and no changes, corrections, anything. On the motion to accept the minutes of August 2nd, Mike,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Will,
Yes.
and yes. The next thing on the agenda was, I understand there was a volunteer coming in to be the
Yep.
seventh member. She is apparently running late, so when she comes in, we'll just, if that's fine with everybody, we'll just pick that up when they get here. So the next thing is, at our last meeting, we discussed having an advisory newsletter. We discussed the forms or the methods that we could get it out. One was to include it in the Historical Society, their monthly, when they put out their newsletter. And Amy is a member of that, and I will let her speak to that. She has some information.
So I emailed Brian Tangway, who's the president of Narragansett Historical, and I spoke to him about exactly what we spoke about. I was just looking for the email, which of course I forgot to tag correctly, but he basically said that if we had a one-page newsletter, he could put it into his system that he uses for the newsletter, which puts out about 45 paper copies of a newsletter to people who don't have email, who are on the mailing list as not email subscribers and not email users, and also puts it out to just under 400 people in their mass mailing. I think the only catch would be that I don't believe the list is segmented for Templeton residents versus past Templeton residents or people who are interested in Templeton and its history. So that could be something that we may need to volunteer some time to work with Brian to help him segment that list. Because obviously it's not relevant to someone who lives in, say, Oakland, California, who's never been in Templeton, who doesn't live in town. They probably aren't super interested in the local political happenings of any kind. So he said yes, he would be willing to circulate it, but I think I would work with him to refine that further and make it relevant to people who are going to get it. He explained that if we wanted to insert it inside of his newsletter, that would be slightly more complicated. So he said he'd rather have us give him sort of a one-page PDF thing that he can just attach or put in a separate email. They use a constant contact system, so it's super easy. You just plug it in and zap it out.
Question. Do you have, well, I mean, you mentioned a number of issues. Is there any insight as to how many folks are really still Templeton, live in town, and who are voters of the community? I mean,
Obviously, we wouldn't have information on people who are registered to vote or not,
Yeah.
because that's not information that the Historical Society collects. We do collect street addresses if they give them.
Yeah.
A lot of the email subscribers we have don't necessarily give their street address. So we'd have to go partially on our own intel, who do you know that lives where?
Yeah.
And then I guess if we felt like we were generating a really small list abnormally, like
Yeah.
if we sat and sort of looked at it and thought we've got to have more than this that live in town just based on volunteers, then we'd have to go ahead and call people or something like that. That could be a little bit more troublesome.
Because that's really the target audience,
Yes.
audience that we're trying to hit.
One thing we could do, or someone on the committee could do, is go to the town clerk and request a copy of the attendance list from the last couple annual town meetings.
Yep.
I mean, that would be one place to start and compare it to names on the historical mailing list, whether it's email or otherwise.
Sure.
And it would be one way to check to see if they're actually a registered voter. It's the easiest, quickest way. A longer list is to look at the property listings on the assessor's page for, you get names and addresses of all
Yeah.
property tax pays in Templeton.
You just gotta drive down the cost part of it. I think we agree as a body that we wanna make sure the information is put out there, and I think we're excited about that part. What kind of mires us is, how much is it gonna cost if the electric company does it? And we found out that they mail stuff from New Jersey, that probably would incur a cost. Is the distribution list even updated? constant contact, is that something that they personally maintain, or do they pay, that's a pay service, right?
The Historical Society pays for it,
They-
yes.
They pay for it, okay.
Yeah. And that's fairly new to the Historical Society, so our list is as up to date as we can get it.
Right.
We are only as good as the information we're given, so not every member reaches back out and updates annually or even every 5 years. So,
Yeah.
and we have some people who've been lifetime members for quite some time.
Yeah. And maybe it's possibly something that we can go our own, if we're keeping it electronic, and then basically developing our own list. Whether it's like we set up a table at the town, special town meeting, regular town meeting, hey, sign up for our newsletter. You know, I think people could get on board with, I would like to see that. I would like to see the perspective of the people about the, you know, what's going on financially, ideas and otherwise. You know, you just put something out on the website, the Facebook page, hey, sign up for our newsletter, rather than trying to latch on to somebody else. I think it's a good idea. It just becomes that burden of, is it gonna cost somebody else, both in man hours and in actual dollars?
Yeah, that's always the trick, is the legwork, the
Right.
setup and getting it.
We're willing to do that part. How much is other people willing to do? I mean, that's fantastic. You know, you wind up automatically reaching like dedicated people who are interested in their town.
Well, one of the avenues we still have is
And
put
you
it,
can do it additionally too.
yeah.
Any-
Once we,
Yeah.
once we get access to the website, it puts stuff on, that would be another area that you could end up, I mean, you wanna take and end up getting the distribution to, as many places as you can, so that folks could, no matter how, I mean, you're not gonna get one individual that's gonna end up going to one particular source all the time.
Right.
So if it's in multiple sources, you have a better chance of getting them updated as to what's happening in their
Right.
community.
It's what they want, you know what I
Right.
mean? There's social media that people go to, there's blogs that are out there. People come to these meetings, people actually will go to the website and pull down meeting minutes and everything as their avenue for getting it. We just wanna be able to have our source to say, hey, we have a newsletter, and here's our greatest hits right up front.
Right. On a side note, I submitted a letter to the editor of the Gardner News, and they published it in its entirety, which I was kind of surprised, because it was more than their 350-word limit. But I got no response, no questions. They just, apparently they did it electronically online yesterday, and then today they published it. I mailed out, I emailed out the letter to everybody. Tony made a couple suggestions that and I put them in. I changed the ending part of it. So it was the first step. I spoke, last night the reporter for the Gardner News that covers the town said he's interested in coming to a meeting. Thursdays are easier for him to attend now rather than Mondays and Wednesdays. So we have that opening. Not that it would be a regular thing, but we start getting things out there, and maybe we can get awareness of a newsletter in the works from this committee, published in the paper. I mean, we take steps and work our way towards getting one done and out there, be it quarterly, semi-annually, whatever, we can work out and work up to. So we have a couple of steps. It was basic information about the state law, the history of how finance committees came to be, the town bylaws, and what our main basic functions are. Just trying to get some information out to the people so they have an understanding of what we do. Yes?
Let me say this, that's exactly what you had put for the Gardner News is exactly what I was looking when I initially suggested having some form of newsletter, is that type of information, so folks could actually see what this committee actually is responsible for. And, because, I mean, some people just are not familiar with what their town government does, and what this finance committee or advisory committee is responsible for. I mean, to me, that hit the nail right on the head as far as describing a lot of stuff that within the committee's bounds.
So clearly, we probably won't have this, I don't think we'd have this up and going by the upcoming special town meeting, but
Probably not.
maybe, first of the calendar year is a realistic timeframe.
I don't know, I think we could probably have a one-page sort of version, very much like your letter. What do we do? What are we responsible for? Almost like bullet points, a really quick Q&A.
agree.
And if we had single-page things, why can't we make some copies and distribute them at the town meeting? Have a table.
Right.
That-
And then people sign up.
So then people can introduce themselves to us, we can talk to people there if they
Yep.
feel a need.
I-
And
I
we can
agree.
sort of be available before the
I
meeting,
agree.
not sequestered, not
Right,
sort
that
of
table that's sitting
being,
way up.
right,
Yeah,
but,
yeah, yeah.
but actually be, before people check in, be in that outer hallway, so that we're not interfering with any process.
Yes.
Just to take an add on to that, the other thing that I had suggested for our goals was a survey. That I had brought up, another community had done a survey of their community about different departments, et cetera. I was online again in this past week, and I saw another whole community that, in cooperation with their selectmen, had put out a survey about what the priorities of the community are, so that they can get a better handle on addressing it with budget-wise, et cetera.
How did they do that, Will?
Pardon me?
How did they do the survey?
They basically come up with questions, that's why I had given,
Electronically, online?
they had sent those out,
Okay.
and they get a,
Paper.
you can expect a certain level of returns naturally. Even if, say you send out 1,000, you can probably expect somewhere about 10%, 10 to 15%
Yeah.
return on most of those. If it's done to households that are, that go to town meetings, et cetera, so that they can end up having some input.
Survey?
Yeah, I think that something like trying to take the pulse of the town is something that the Board of Selectmen should entertain and not necessarily the advisory
Right.
committee.
Well, the advisory did it in one community, and it was the advisory for finance along with the Board of Selectmen in another community. I'm just pointing those two out, is because those are two separate, I mean,
Yeah, those things are
it depends on and basically we have, and the summation from, I know that the town council way back said we had a strong advisory committee. If you have a strong advisory committee, it's appropriate to do that.
Yeah.
That they can ask that, because now you have an idea, rather than the 7 people, you have an idea of what other community folks do, and go along with what we need to take and end up doing as our job.
Well, fundamentally, I like the idea, but I think at a minimum, it should come from the Board of Selectmen, maybe from both committees. I definitely want to see the results of that, but I'm not sure that it's our place to take the pulse of the town. What's most interesting, because we can't really act on what's most important to people. That's really the Board of Selectmen that would do that.
Well, you can end up, as far as putting priorities, especially budgetary-wise, finance-wise, as to what the town sees as an example for the finances. I mean, if all of a sudden you get back that they have a particular department that they have a low priority on it, and they're asking for a large amount of money, you may not want to take and end up giving that a large amount of money.
The selectmen's workshop, on the agenda, they talked about a outreach plan, how, it's a communication plan for how all the town echelon all the different departments, how they communicate with the public. I think this would feed 100% into that. I didn't catch the second half of the meeting to see how, how much, I know you were at the school meeting, but how much did they actually go into that? That was a huge agenda item. From some of the previous meetings, they talked about that. How are we gonna communicate with our constituents? Because, you know, watching the Laurel View meeting, people want record keeping, they want accountability. That was one of the big themes that I saw from that meeting was how, hey, something from the selectmen's warrant to the town meeting, how did you guys miss that? They wanted to see what the transparency was. So like a survey or a way to communicate, whether it's this committee or just all of the town in general, is very important. And the Facebook site actually works well for the police department. I know that they get a lot of hits that way. So maybe that's something that we wind up saying, how do we contribute with it? Can the advisory committee do a survey? I know Facebook does surveys. Is that something we can do?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think if we're gonna use a social media site of any kind, you can always use something like a SurveyMonkey, which is paid on a
Right.
one at a time sort of basis,
Yeah.
to link that, to throw it on the Facebook and link it to Templeton Police. Hey, why don't you guys check this out? Link it over to the
They share it,
town
yeah.
administration page or whatever.
It's a fantastic
But,
idea.
but that's all subject to each thing getting done and everything working, like we were just talking about communication
Right.
and everybody being on the same
And
page.
so this idea would wind up going on to the newsletter. I think
Right.
it's a nested idea within the newsletter. I know that I'm trying to stay on your agenda topic, but I think we're getting somewhere with it, like how we would control it, how we would market it, and how we would nest it within the selectmen's view for how that outreach actually occurs.
Well, newsletter is one way to take it into putting that survey out.
There was talk at a couple of selectmen's meetings about either the selectmen or the town administrator or in conjunction, and some communities do this. It's like a citizens academy, if
Yeah,
people
they
volunteer to
mentioned that,
come in as far as learning about
Yeah, Carter
the
mentioned it.
government, and different committees, boards come in and explain to them, and I don't know if it's been followed up, if it's just, was put out there and then hasn't materialized.
Yeah, Carter talked about it last night with embedded in the TA intern program. I believe that's where he was embedding it. As part of that tiered plan to roll out, that was part of it, the Citizens Academy. He mentioned that specifically.
I know there's one community that are doing it, and they're even doing Cory checks to attend. That was a little,
Really?
yeah, but, so there's, so we can work up on this newsletter approach, and try, like I said, probably realistically, it's like the first of the year,
Yeah.
maybe.
Logically, yeah.
When we're talking about like one page, would we like assign ourselves
Maybe sooner,
topics?
but,
Yeah, like letter from the chair, this month's focus is on stabilization funds. Do you know what that is? Or, hey, here's the news, we're using a checklist to check the financial health of the town. We would like assign each other or assign, is that how you envision it? I mean, where would the content come from, I guess is my question.
Okay, so we'll carry this over, and maybe, I shouldn't say this, but,
Then don't, it's on tape.
no, the craft fair is this week, and the Historical Society is open. Could try to touch base with Brian.
Yes, he is waiting for the birth of his first grandchild, so he will be there unless his grandchild arrives. But the building will be open. There will be someone there to speak to.
Yeah, Harry should be there, Harry Aldridge.
Yes.
He should be there, so
Yes.
it's something to try, so, very good.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Permission to speak.
no,
Good.
Yes, Carol?
I want to thank you for writing that letter to the Gardner News, because it's been months and months where nothing has been published. I don't know if anything's been written about our town, good or bad, okay? The other thing is, thank you, Jeffrey. The other thing is, I want to thank the Gardner News for publishing it, because I think the newspaper is still important, because I don't have one of those doohickey things that you all got in front of you. I get my news from the good old paper. You don't get much in it now because they don't do things like that letter anymore. They don't put in a lot of stuff that they should. Weddings, births, all of that good stuff that's in a local paper. I could care less about somebody in Timbuktu, but I do want to thank you, Jeffrey, and the Gardner News for doing what they did. That means we do still have a democracy.
Thank you, Carol. All right, the next item, the expenditure reports, or budget versus actual. We got these sooner than what was originally put out, which is a good thing. We did not get a month of June, but we got an end of the year for 2018, and we got month of July for fiscal year 19. I have one item that I would like to highlight. As a matter of fact, no, go ahead first, Will, go ahead.
I was a little bit disappointed when I got this. The reason being is that it doesn't give the whole picture. Past years, not only did you end up getting the expenditure portion of it, but you get the revenue side. So that's a really the full year as far as a report that we should be looking at. I mean, one side of it is, it doesn't tell the whole story. We had gotten the revenue side of it, and that becomes important when you start doing into the budget, is to see how much revenue has come in versus what was expected. I mean, you don't see that here. I mean, we could have expected $100 million for something, and we only got 50. That's an issue that, did they show as to what the revenue was, their expectations? I mean, because that was one of the things that we passed to the select board in, when they were doing the 2018. I do have a copy of the presentation that was made by Paul Grubb, our members, based upon past year's history, showing that the revenue projections were very, well, let me say that they weren't conservative. They were very, very aggressive as far as the amount of money coming in. Right.
Yeah, Deb, you can take that chair at the end.
Actually,
Yeah.
just have a seat
okay.
right next to the table, please,
Yeah.
okay? Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
I want to stop here, and we'll talk to a prospective new member. I just will say that with regards to the revenue and stuff, I believe that will be put out as planned or stated in a town administrator's report on August
22nd.
22nd.
Yep.
Their meeting, it will be the last quarter, and it usually has the end of all the revenue details. And yes, past years, we would get the revenue, expenditure, everything together, but I think because we pestered them so much that we finally got the expenditure portion. So we should be getting the revenue numbers and that detail by the end of this month.
One of the things I want to point out is that
I would just want
July?
to
July
If we can
was,
get back to this?
oh, I just want to take a point, one thing before you go on. July, if you look at the date, we should be able to get it within 10 days. They've issued July on the 7th.
So,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
that's all right. Back to item 2, new member consideration. With regards to the town bylaw, members of the advisory committee are appointed through the town moderator at the end of the annual town meeting. And if there's not enough members to to have a 7-member committee, the moderator has 30 days from the adjournment of town meeting. And we had someone, but that person chose to serve on another board for the town, which is a good thing. It's, I wish, like I said, I wish he would have chosen this one, but he's serving on something. So when that happened, I contacted the moderator and asked him if he had any more candidates with interest, and he stated he had none. As a matter of fact, he said, "I'll get back to you," and didn't. I contacted the selectman's office, and they had no interest forms in there. So within the bylaw, after the 30-day period, if we have an opening, the committee can fill the vacancy, which is good until the next annual town meeting. And if the individual wants to volunteer and serve for another term, they just fill out an interest form, let the moderator know, and then show up at town meeting, and you can get appointed that way. So we've put out the word, and we've gone through members, and Mike had an individual, or a couple individuals, who expressed interest, and we have one here tonight, and her name is Deborah Wilder. Mike, you know, background familiar, you brought her. Traditionally, the committee members usually ask some questions, background, this or that. I have none. I just want to have a 7th person to be on here. My thought, as I stated to someone who questioned, he said, "I don't know if I'm qualified to be chairman," and I said, "If you can do 4th grade math, you can be chairman of this committee.
That's
You can
right.
serve on this committee. We just need people to volunteer and be willing to work and put in the time." So, Mike, you had sent out some of her LinkedIn background.
Yep. I've known Deb for many years, our family friends, and I think that Deb had expressed to me she wanted to be more involved with the community, and I 100% wholeheartedly nominate her for to fill the 7th seat.
It's good enough for me.
Sounds like a movie.
I'd like to take it just to do the same thing that we had with other members, just to give
If
a
she
background.
would,
Elevator speech, yeah.
if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Might want to turn like the microphone to her or something.
Yeah, if you can. So they
Yeah, we're on
can-
TV.
You're being
This is being
recorded on
taped.
TV,
It's-
so.
yeah, it's out on the cable.
You're on TV star now.
Oh, lovely. Would have put on a little more makeup. No. My name is Deborah Wilder. I've lived in Templeton for just about 12 years now. I'm married, have 2 children. We live over on Victoria Lane. I work as a contractor for the Massachusetts National Guard Child and Youth Program. What I do is I develop programs for dependent children of our service members to help build their life skills and resiliency, so when their parent has to step away from the home, they can handle those challenges that military life throws at them. Currently working for a big event this weekend, which is our youth symposium, so we bring in a lot of leadership development speakers and whatnot to, again, just provide those opportunities for our military children to become more resilient. I previously worked at State Street Bank in Boston and in North Quincy, so I have a financial background as well. And I don't know, is there any other questions I can answer for you?
I'd
All
like
right,
to-
we'll start at this end and work our way down.
I'd like to, first of all, thank you for volunteering. Volunteering in this community, that's a big commitment, because there's quite a bit, and there's quite a bit, that we do for the community per se, is try to end up helping the community understand what the finances of the community are. My one question, other than thanking you for at least stepping up, would be to take and end up giving just an idea as to what do you think the advisory committee is responsible for it. I asked that because I'd like to get some type of background on what you think versus what you're gonna find out what we actually do.
Sure, sure. You know, while I'm not overly familiar, I know from attending town meetings in the past, when questions arise and we're voting on different articles, I have seen the advisory committee being asked as to how you would vote, you know, what your opinion is of what's happening within the town. So I'm guessing that one of the things as an advisory council you would be looking at is basically looking at those articles and identifying what's best for the town, so that it's sort of a smaller committee doing a lot of the research to help the townspeople know this is the direction we think we want to go in, this is what we think is best.
Because we're part of the legislation, and I say legislation is the the voters out there that vote at town meeting. We represent them per se, and that's really
Right.
one of our main functions per se.
Okay.
That's my question.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept Deborah Wilder as our newest member under Article 4, I think it's Section 4 of the bylaws to become a member, and that to instruct her that she ends up having to being sworn in by the town clerk before she can end up officially voting on it. You can participate this evening in discussion, but that's, I vote that they can end up basically under, and end up having the chairman notify both the town clerk, the moderator, and the selectman's office that we have filled the position, so that they can end up getting that position off the website.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Tony. All right. Motion made and seconded to accept appoint Deborah Wilder as a member of the advisory committee to serve until the next annual town meeting, per the town bylaw. All right. Since there's nothing further, Mike,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
She just wants another
I'm not
female
going
on
there.
board.
Will?
I don't think I made that any sort of secret.
Yes.
And yes. And thank you very
Come
much
join us.
for
welcome.
volunteering.
Thank you very much.
We have a secret handshake too.
Oh, okay.
But we have a member of the Board of Selectmen here, so we can't show it.
You get to sit by the oldest member of the board,
Did you give
or the
her-
committee.
You don't think you are,
give
but
her
you
my
are.
email address so she
You have to be
can,
over 30,
send it
too.
to us?
I got another 5 years for that.
Me too.
You can just email me or whatever.
Okay, thank you.
See, the town clerk is-
All right. Now we are
She
seven.
has sent the email.
Woo-hoo.
PDF, 9 megabyte PDF.
All right.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
It's the same email. It's,
You're set.
I am good.
This is an agenda she can kind of follow along.
it's, he sent it on the 9th.
All right, back at the expenditure reports, I have one item to mention.
Yeah, at 9:25 p.m.
I don't know, I saved it to my thing.
I got it.
Come on. 3, 4.
So,
And yes, I have some paperwork.
That's one of them.
This is just a couple of
The forms,
documents.
The 9th.
And then this one's
And
the
for
other
you.
one. Oh, no, wait, that's the other. Yeah, this is the other one.
And one sheet is from the sewer ban that's listed on the town website under the Selectmen's packet for the August 8th, 2018 Selectmen's meeting. Halfway down the page, it has the stabilization fund. And it notes that the balance of the stabilization fund as of June 30th, 2017 was 106,730. Now, this is on a band to borrow money for the sewer pump station. This went through town's financial advisor, which used to be First Southwest, and now it's merged. But anyway, that is the balance that they say that was in there as of June 30th. The second page shows the special town meeting of November 2017, Article 11, with $137,500 going into the general stabilization fund. I added those two together and I got 244,203.
Right.
However, when I look at the end of the year, budget to actual, it's on page, I'll make sure I got the right one, 6, on page 6. Towards the top of the page, it shows the general stabilization to have a balance of, it was allocated and ending, which nothing has been spent out of it, at 234,161.64. That's roughly a $10,000 difference.
Yeah.
I had not sent anything to the accountant or the administrator to question this. I wanted to point this out to the committee members.
Can you, so this is a ban notice, that doesn't mean that the information is 100% correct. Do we have the year end for 17 to cross-reference that number, the 107 number? Or the 106, 730 number, I'm sorry? So do we have the end of year financials for FY17 to see what page 6 or line,
We did receive it in the middle of August.
so what I'd really, I mean, and it could be something simple, someone just,
It could be, I mean, you hit the wrong thing or a wrong
I mean, but
entry.
with $10,000, it would have to be, that number would have to be in the 90s. So I think we should definitely look at that report just to see what it says. And if it does say the 106, 730, and then the 230, then the addition of the 137.5, then we should inquire.
And that's what was shown on the audit report. And I believe the audit report is still online for 17. It's there, kind of hard to find, well, I can't remember where they placed it.
I think it's all over with the town accountant. Find it right now for you.
So, let's see.
The budgets versus actual.
You got all the audit reports in there. Oh,
17 is not.
That number was actually in the budget also. There was a number in the budget for stabilization also.
Yes.
And that's not reported monthly, right?
I'll see if real quick if I can,
Stabilization isn't reported in the monthly, end of month reports, right? I don't see it.
see, that's,
Yeah, it's not reported.
trying to find, if I can find it real
I'd just
quick.
hate to have somebody have some bad information. Yeah.
Jeffrey? What is the number you're looking for? I have it all up, the FY17 number.
The one, no, I'm looking at the budget to actual for 17 to see if the stabilization fund is actually 106,730.
So at the end, the FY17 audit close was 106,730 as of June 30th, 2017.
Right, that's what we want to know. So that confirms this number. So then there's a $10,000 discrepancy in what the budget versus actual, the year-end statement
And
for
it's-
18
it's-
says should be in the account.
Okay.
Yeah, it, like I said, it's 234 is typed, and it should be 244. I mean, it could be a,
Could be a typo.
and that's just, those are things that happen during the course of the year that it always seems like we're trying to be like a pain in the butt, but we ask the questions for clarification on this, and sometimes we go, back and forth. And this is why, another example of the importance of the timing of getting these things. So if we find something like that, we can send an email to the accountant, the administrator, the selectman to say, hey, you should check this. Because we have found errors before, and they were corrected. It's part of what we're.
I mean, the
all
adding
about-
up should be all, it should be all formulas, but if the data going into the formula is incorrect, then it's gonna be incorrect.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Yep. So you're gonna take a note to inquire about the difference with the accountant?
I will. I will send an email to Carter and the accountant.
Yeah.
To check on this.
I'd like to think I'd end up just going a little further on that, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, that's just that's the one thing that struck out on me, the limited time that I've looked at it.
What
There are
disturbs
some
me
other
about,
things, but I
what
wanted to
disturbs
wait
me
till-
about the fact that you just brought something out about what we just went for a ban for the surge, is to take and end up showing that figure of 106,730 when we know we have more in stabilization, as it's shown, no matter what the number is, it's in the 230 to 40,000. And the other issue was the OPEB is on here for 20,000, and they're only showing 64. And to me, if you're going to end up going for a ban, you want to end up showing the most positive, which would be the larger stabilization as well as the larger amount that you have in OPEB. In both cases, it's less. I mean, I just see too many errors being made with finances going from one side, one document to another. And that concerns me. We should, should be consistent when you end up going out for any ban, that you have the most latest up-to-date number. I mean, you got, on the 7th, it was already issued here, and this document, I believe, was done about the same time, showing those numbers. I mean, to me, that shows lack of attention to detail.
That's TA's response.
I believe the use of the 17 numbers was questioned at a selectmen's meeting, and Cam can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the answer was, it was the use of audited numbers for the band.
That was in regards to, I believe it was the ban, but Bob May had raised that issue, yes, yeah. We had used the FY17 numbers because those were audited and clean.
I believe that was,
That's
What's the
typically how
what's
you
the
do
date
it
of
with
this
debt
document?
servicing on that end. They want, because they built that report, So we fed them whatever information, and so since they built that report, that was the number they chose to use, was FY17.
What's the date of this report?
Is that-
What's the date of this document?
That is to be signed, I think, at the
21st.
August 22nd meeting, I think.
21st or 22nd?
22nd.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the money to go into stabilization was voted by the town at annual town meeting
In May.
in May, so there's really no reason for that number not to reflect the larger number.
Right. Same thing with the OPEB. It was, both of those numbers were voted at annual town meeting, and they should have reflected on that document. It shouldn't be a case of audited numbers. You voted more money, and that, the town voted more money, and it should reflect that.
Well, and to say that it's an audited amount is sort of irrelevant because it's an exact voted amount. It's not gonna change, the audit shouldn't change it unless you're just going strictly by the percentage that goes, by the bylaw. I forget the percentages that goes into stabilization. But I don't think they did
I was,
that right.
just for clarification on that audited number, that was coming out of a report for going out for a bond. So they had that packet together, and Bob May had requested why use this number instead of this number.
Right, that's,
Yeah,
so what I'm saying is, I don't know when the packet went out,
yeah,
but if it went out within a reasonable time after town meeting,
yep.
we already knew that there was gonna be an increase to the stabilization fund by 137,500.
Yep.
That should have been added to this number because it's a known number, even though it's not audited.
Yep.
It was a known number, and it, quite frankly, it makes the town look better. Doesn't, I mean, still, 244,000 doesn't make us look great, but it's better than 106.
Once again, we didn't make the report, we just fed them numbers, and that was the number they chose to use, the company that had built that report for us. So, I don't know if they had that relevant information at the time they requested for it.
So there's a company that built the report for you?
The report that I'm referring to, that Bob May had raised question to
And when you
2
say,
weeks ago.
when you say you fed them,
I'd like to find out.
I'm
No, not me, I personally didn't feed
I
them.
understand it's not you,
Yeah.
but I'm saying, when you say we fed them that information, who's
Yeah.
the we?
We would be the financial team, so.
Financial team?
Yeah, so they request a bunch of information so that they can build their report to should
See,
we or should we not.
To me, and I have to take a go along with you, Tony, is that the finance team already knew that those additional amounts were put in for OPEB and also for stabilization.
Maybe they relayed that and they
that's-
chose not to use those numbers.
So that's
I mean,
what
I
I'm,
didn't make
Cam,
the
that's what I'm
report.
trying to
Yeah.
find out is, did the finance committee have the information already voted at town before the information was fed to the company? And then why did they choose not, just to use an audited amount versus a voted amount?
So I think that's the disconnect here,
Yeah.
is that I don't know what they fed them for information, the finance team, that's in the nitty gritty. But whatever the company chose to use, and I agree that if they were to use the higher number, I'm assuming the town fed them the higher number. And they probably said, well, that hasn't hit yet, or X, Y, or Z, or depending on when the information was given, that they couldn't include it, so they used what the audited number was as a
Okay.
FY17.
Yeah, I guess
I
it's
mean,
it's understanding the process a little bit better.
Yeah,
And it's like, there's a line in there about unassigned funds and the free cash. And for 17, they have a number that's been certified. The 18 has not been certified yet. So they may just be tying all the numbers to a set that they have.
Yeah,
that's
certified
known.
audited amounts.
I mean, it would look better if you put a bigger stabilization number, but, okay, that's an 18 number, your free cash is a 17 number. I'm just thinking the way government goes, that, instead of having numbers from like 3 different years, you have them all from 1 year, and they're all known. And yeah, it would bode better for the town, I believe, to have a higher savings and the like, but it just may be that the financial advisor is, said, with Templeton's history, use these numbers, so they're all same from 1 year. I'm just guessing, but
yeah, I don't
me,
think
it kinda
Templeton would
makes sense
consciously
to
make that decision to
not
say
have
use
3
the lower
different
number.
years' numbers when you're getting a ban.
Subtract that. Still leaves you
But that would be a good question.
Should have been in there. over the
If anybody's
2 years.
curious, the report I'm referring to, as of 8/8/2018, there's a sewer ban. I think it's item D. There's a whole report where they compiled a bunch of financial information, and that's kind of what we're referring to. So, and you can see that Templeton doesn't endorse it, it's the company that
Yeah,
made the report.
yeah, I mean, I don't wanna belabor it, I mean, if you're paying a company to do the ban for you, that they're gonna want all the most favorable data for you, hopefully. So, maybe that's just part of their process.
So,
So those, the handout that you gave us, Jeff, that's this last year's will do, you know, this is what we're gonna deposit to.
Yep.
Okay. So as I'm reading the ledger to budget to actual ending June 30th, which is where you're pulling the 234 figure for, the capital stabilization, it's reading 42,000. So basically the balance was $2,000 prior to this year's deposits. Am I reading that correctly?
The amount of free cash that was put in stabilization, you're talking about?
Right.
There was,
Or, I mean,
this was,
this was a
the free
budgeted-
cash, the free cash was broken out into a number of going into different funds. Some into the general stabilization, some into the capital stabilization, the one you're talking about for vehicles, because they're anticipating the purchase of a vehicle, the 42,000. And if you look at the warrant article, the 40, I think it's the 40 or 42,000 was for I can't remember which vehicle. It was either a dump truck or the police cruiser, and along with some other monies that they can end up purchasing it. And that was the amount of money. They actually broke it out. You'd have to look at, and I think it's broken out in the budget document where you look at the unallocated, and then you see how much was deficit, and then you have $1 million. They had $1 million, and then they ended up starting allocating it to different accounts by the annual meetings.
Yep. I was just looking for if you found that 10K error, I was trying to see whether, was that a systemic thing? And I was just trying to follow
Oh, yes,
the
okay,
logic
yeah.
of where that
Gotcha,
error might
yeah.
have occurred. I don't need to know if they did like a intra-fund transfers, or, you know, because they realized one was gonna need more than the other. So really, that's the only reason I asked the question.
So based on what I see, the municipal capital stabilization, if you add the 40, if you looked at that balance today, it should
Yeah.
be 82,000.
Okay, there should be.
There should be. Now, what's in there, we don't know, because we'd have to ask.
Okay. I'd be interested in seeing that.
If that's the right one. I forget which ones.
Well, no, because that wouldn't be the case. Because the other, the 137, has already been appropriated and it shows in the line item for
Oh, yeah.
234,
Yeah, you're
right?
You're right. Okay.
So that's
I
why I
see what
said
you're
it should
saying.
be, it was $2,000, and then we, as planned, added $40,000 to that
Okay,
line item.
yeah, you might be, yeah.
Right. So I was trying to figure out if there might have been like a, capital got more money than anticipated, trying to chase down that 10K, or, you know. So I think as the committee, we're basically saying, hey, we're seeing an error here, can you give us some feedback?
Yep.
yeah, but it's a question I'll forward to the town administrator and the accountant. Just, we saw this, might wanna look at it
Right.
and explain how that,
And the report that Cam was looking at substantiated the 106, so.
Both I actually looked at Roselli Clark's audit, it was with a 106.
Okay. Good catch.
Chairman, one other thing. I don't see the additional monies on the budget, the budget to actual. It shows the 975,000 that was voted a couple of years ago. And then they show the $2.2 million for the sewage pumping station, but I don't see at least I have it, I've looked at it. I don't see the amount of money for the police station that was voted at $2.5 million in addition to the 975. It's not accounted for in this.
Have they borrowed it yet? Was there a ban for that?
We got $9 million that they went out for. And the $2.2 million was supposed to be part of that 9 million, as far as I understood.
How long ago was that?
Couple, what is it, 2 months ago? About
The
2 months
9 mil,
ago.
I recall that. So
Right, about
a
2
month
months ago, the selectmen voted to take it end up going out for a $9 million ban, and they went out for a
That was-
$10 million ban last October
Yep.
for the school, and this 9 was supposed to be for the school, for the police station, and also for the pumping station.
That's something I can't really speak to why it was done like that. That was recommended by our treasury advisor, whoever's doing that. They,
Why they lumped it,
they-
I have no idea, but
yeah.
that's,
It was a strategy for going out for a bond or something like that, was to lump out.
rather than multiple bonds,
Yeah.
lump it all together.
I think that's what it was, yeah.
But it doesn't break it down so that it's understandable, let's put it that way.
Yeah, it was a peculiar situation, but it was recommended by our investment.
But I don't see that,
You're seeing that the balance wasn't affected. I mean, could it be that the transaction hasn't gone through yet? If this
It's
is an actual.
borrowing one large sum rather than 3 or 4, so it doesn't look like you're penny, you know, it's,
but I don't see that 9 million bond on here either. It looks like they have the 10 million on here, and they've allocated for this, the year, some of the funds, but
But if we already took the money down.
it's not broken out very well.
What's the payment schedule? When do you start? Because you haven't levied the taxes for this stuff.
is there any other,
Fund's got 16 million in it.
any other discussion on the expenditure report? or-
I got nothing else.
No.
Other than those couple of questions? All right.
General fund was 16 million.
Right.
Should I- am I
Next
looking
item,
for-
actually, the next two items kind of go together, because I believe we discussed, they go hand in hand, is an advisory timetable of specific documents to go along with the advisory checklist.
Right.
It's just something I put together quickly as an idea or thought of an approach possible.
That's a total roll-up
Is
of the
it?
budget, yeah.
Some of them are mandated by law, like the school districts, they have until March 30th. They have to, but they have to inform the town what the certified budget voted by the school committee is. They can do it earlier. And I understand Monty Tech is going to do it, has committed to doing it earlier this year coming up. Narragansett, we may we may get a hint with that meeting in October. What their plans are with the budget approach. I mean, it would help the town side if we know earlier what their certified budget is.
All right.
I think they probably watch the Chapter 70 allocation and try to put that out as far out as possible for when House 1 comes out, and then they start finagling and see what the governor wants, and they start talking as far as numbers go. It's just some documents, some ideas that I thought we should, we can use to look at. Some approaching the budget season, some will come in during the budget meetings in I think it's February, March. the town meeting warrants were mandated by bylaw to get those by a specific date, unless they're changed by a bylaw change. So, again, this was just my thought, my idea. I don't, anybody has any other thoughts, ideas, additional documents,
Let me just-
subtract some, add some?
Let me just input that, that's one of the documents that we'll be talking about later. I had looked at other communities, and they have somewhat of a timetable such as this within that,
Right.
their procedural document.
Yeah, and it's in the handbook too, right? We got
Yes.
some guidance in the handbook.
Yes, that's correct.
And all of the resources that we've collected as a new body, Deb, I will share those with you. Handbooks, some of the things that these guys have emailed out. Will and Jeff are, they're kind of the consistency, and the rest of us are, drinking up some of the stuff that they had. So I'll make sure I share those with you.
Thank you.
Just not the Kool-Aid.
Don't feel old.
Just not the
to
Kool-Aid.
say that.
Right.
And there still is the checklist that is in the Finance Committee handbook for additional things. I mean, if later on,
Basically a 7-step process. 7 or 8
If,
step process.
with some reminders of things to look at to ensure that we clarify and make sure is included in different things.
Well, am I skipping ahead at all by saying that the checklist that you had sent out for our review, that kind of meets both that, because it has the timelines within that as well, that sample checklist? Like, when the Narragansett Regional High School or school district certifies their budget, when that occurs, okay.
Yeah, the school district, their E&D stuff, they have a state mandate when they have to file that. And when it shows up online sometime it's pretty quick, and sometime it lags a little bit, but, they have a timeline of reporting, time frame that they have to get that in. And that is available on the DLS website to look at. It's in the open, so, as most of this stuff is. And if nothing further, the next item is the advisory bylaw. The selectmen, as you know, put something forth at the annual town meeting, through a lot of, my thought is, a lot of effort by Tony, convincing town meeting to pass that by until, in the hopes of the advisory and the selectmen working a little bit closer together, at least being given a heads up before it gets presented to town meeting, so we have input into it. I emailed everybody that document from back in 2015 when this committee requested town council input to it. I went into the town clerk's office to look at the annual town meeting of 2014. I was trying to see if there was documentation of the substitute motion that was made concerning, the original motion was for Article 4 of Section 4 of the Advisory Committee, and the substitute motion was made to affect Article 3, Section 4. And I was curious to see who made the substitute motion, but there is no record of it.
Really?
They started, town clerk told me that they were recommended, I think, by the DOR or the Secretary of State's to start including those, written motions in the town meeting record. But apparently, it wasn't in there.
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe that's the whole point of having them written, right?
I thought so, but, whatever the case may be, I looked through the folder and it wasn't there. My only other option is to request, a DVD copy of it and watch the meeting.
Was it, is it on YouTube?
I don't know if 2000, I would have to check, if 2014 was on.
2014.
Oh, from 2014.
Is that what you're looking at, is 2014?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking this last one, sorry.
So I'd buy a DVD and go home and,
Well, I know this, I mean, what we had brought up the last time on the bylaw and watching the selectmen's meeting, I think we just need to come up with a date. I know Cam and John basically raised the hand and said, we'll be the two. So we choose our two, get together and hash this thing out, move forward.
I believe did they talk about it at the workshop last night, Amy? I know you were there.
All I heard was when it came up on their agenda, Mr. Kaplis restated that he and Mr. Forts would be the ones on their behalf. He asked, the town administrator if he had heard from this committee. Town administrator said no, he had not heard from this committee regarding this, and that, he considered it, just to paraphrase, you can watch the meeting to see exactly what he said, but sort of the idea that he felt like the discussion was dead in the water. And then they turned to me and asked when we met again, and I said tomorrow. So I think they should have known this was a discussion on our agenda for this week, given what happened yesterday and last week at the Board of Selectmen meeting. And I told them further that we hadn't met since they'd had that discussion 2 weeks ago. We hadn't sat together.
And we haven't officially gotten any communication like, these are the two selectmen that are gonna be on that. And I know you had said you would volunteer for it.
Right.
Does anyone else?
Amy
To be on that?
If you need
Because
somebody else,
I would
that'd be fine.
I would send an email to the
Yeah,
administrators.
I know that they've already figured out who's gonna meet. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I'm all for moving forward and having the right language in there. I know, I mean, I think we get a good sense of how, we don't want the budget, but we want to be an equal partner.
Right.
Well, that's one of the reasons I sent out all that information at our last
Absolutely,
meeting.
very helpful.
Because if you look at Winchendon, which is the comparison community that they used in the budget,
Did you send that email or did Jeff?
I did.
Okay.
With all of that. I didn't send you all of the bylaws and charter stuff. I gave you a sampling, and it was very clear that a majority of the communities, basically, it's the advisory committee's budget that goes before the town meeting. Now, in any town meeting, anybody can end up making a substitute motion, whether it be off the floor, or selectmen, or in this particular case, like we have done in the past, because we haven't given the opportunity to have a separate line item on that. But in Winchendon, their charter shows that the administrator starts the thing, he
Yeah.
gives it to the selectmen.
Yeah.
And later on in their bylaws, it basically spells out that the advisory committee is the one that presents. Orange, the same thing. If you look at enough of these communities, it's all the same thing about who presents the budget. It's not that we make the budget, it's the presentation of the budget by the finance or advisory or warrant committee, depending on how you wanna, however the communities talk it. And there's a lot of it, and as you saw, I ended up not only doing the comparison communities that they had in the budget, but I also did a cut at 18 to 20 communities that are about the same size as us. There is a lot of other communities that are even not on that are larger and smaller, that if you look at their websites, bylaws, et cetera, it does spell that out. You're in the minority if you don't.
I forwarded the email to all of you. I don't know
Yeah,
if you had a
I
chance to
think
get
that's
it.
the email I'm talking about. I think we're pretty clear on what we want to do. It's basically those four people getting together, and what our committee wants is to basically make sure that we're following we have our eye on the state statute, and that there's not, out of the bylaw mess that we have now, and I use that term very fluidly, mess, that we're going forward with our best effort. I know the TA has some ideas about it, about what it should be, or what's going to be presented in the special town meeting. But we're trying to make sure that it makes sense for the flow and the timing for how that budget winds up going through the process and then is presented at annual town meeting.
I'm gonna follow up,
I think the four of us can do
this
that
evening
quite
with
easily.
with an email
Yeah.
to Mr. Hickey about, just to clarify, the presenting part.
Yeah.
Because their town charter that they just did not too long ago says this, and then they have bylaws that say something else.
Yep.
And in his email, he said, the budget is presented, at town meeting, each warrant article is presented, and the selectmen answer any questions. The finance committee may comment as well if they would like.
Right.
But it didn't specifically say who presents it. And I was just trying to get an idea from them, because Will sent out Winchendon as one of the examples.
Mhm.
And I gonna contact them and see, how do you do it? I mean, if we're gonna use it as an example community, I want to ensure that, does the finance committee actually present it to town meeting?
Yeah,
Or
because-
is it a combination? Is it the selectmen? I know what their bylaw says, but, I'm curious to know how it's exactly happens. And he was very good about answering.
Yeah, I thought it was
emailed
very
this morning, and
straightforward. I think the only thing that's confounding us right now is where's the codification process? So what has gone forward? And if we make any changes to correct this, correct the bylaw, whether it's by warrant or, it's on the town meeting warrant. But how will that, if we're getting back codified bylaws that are not what we're expecting, and we're changing them, I think that screws it up.
See, the big problem was when
Oh, you can't change
the
it.
change was done in 14,
Yeah.
that they can end up having the selectman and administrator do it. They caused the conflict. If they had changed the wording that they can say that they end up initiating the budget and presenting it to the finance committee, and then left the finance committee bylaw alone, it would have worked out.
Right.
But that's not the case.
Well, I know the selectmen presented a proposed change to the advisory committee bylaw, but again, there was a substitute motion that went away from the advisory committee and it went to Article 3. And basically replaced the bylaw section that had been voted on the year before, that actually said we would have a town administrator and what his duties would be.
Yep.
And then it got replaced by a substitute motion by, I don't know who made the substitute motion. It was a selectman, advisory, somebody from town meeting floor.
Wasn't the advisory.
I
So
don't
how do we fix the conflict in the bylaws?
have to find that out,
Exactly.
I mean, that's really what we're trying to do, is fix the conflict in the bylaw.
Yep.
And it says,
Having-
develop. Nowhere do we have a bylaw that says clearly present. We have a Mass General law that says present unless you have a bylaw. But again, it goes back to Mike's point, the codification. I don't know when, that was supposed to happen this fall.
Thought it was done.
Before, and you're like,
I have no idea.
you know about as much as we
I
do.
have no idea. I guess the latest news is that it is now done. That's what I've heard. So it should be coming out in front of the Board of Selectmen very
I
shortly.
have heard it's in-house, but then I heard that it's not ready yet and may not be presented before fall town meeting, and if that's the case, then I agree with Tony. It's like, why would we have a change of bylaw if we're having codification coming with possible changes and we're gonna further muddy the waters? To me, you should do nothing until we see the codification and what they say. Yes.
I just want to say that I think even forming this subcommittee, and not even a formal subcommittee, but just delegating 2 people from each board to really just sit down and have these conversations so that we can get all this stuff up in the air, we can discuss it in civil discourse or whatever, we report back to our respective boards. I think just by forming this, even if we identify the bylaw issue, and we don't change anything, nothing comes out of that as of now because there is a codification. We still have it hammered out, we still have some sort of format and foundation to continue with for progress. And I think that might even serve for future issues that come about, you know, even in the budget season, if we need to split off and form some sort of subcommittee. Because then you're not bound by open meeting law. You can all talk very freely and then split back away and report.
Get stuff done.
Yeah.
So, Amy, you volunteered to be on that subcommittee, correct?
Yes, but I would yield if Mike and either you or Will want to do it instead, because we can only have 2 representatives, not 3. So I think, from my point of view, I think it's important that either you or Will be there because of your knowledge of the bylaws and your experience in this area. And I know that Mike might feel a certain way about doing it, so I would yield in light of that.
What say you there, Major?
I'm for that. I agree with Amy. One of you should be on that from a historical perspective, and then coming up with who's got time to do it.
My only thing is, and this is just my strange way of thinking, sometimes the old timers show up and it's a pre-expectation, and I think a different view, a different look, maybe a different attitude to go about this. It's a general discussion.
I don't care. I think it's gonna be me and someone else.
And if I might point out, although there is 2 that would be recommended coming from the advisory committee, Jeff, if you want to serve in an advisory capacity, because at that point you still would not be violating open meeting law. So 2 people could go to the, you know, so that it's not an outnumbering
That's just-
essential. and
That's
then-
just my thought on the thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
So it can really be 3, but.
Yeah, I mean,
I think the hard part's gonna be just.
yeah,
finding
it's
the
sort
time
of
to do it.
balancing what you said, but with your
Yeah.
background knowledge of the bylaws,
That's
it's
a good idea.
what's best for the committee.
Be looking at me like that.
Don't look at me after I told you what I think.
I'll do whatever the committee wishes.
Me and Jeff. Okay.
I'm good with that.
Mend some
Nothing
open wounds,
says
Jeff.
nothing says no, a member can't attend
Right.
the subcommittee meeting.
And I already know that you're good with email. I think we all know that. I think as much as we can get done, and if we wind up meeting for coffee to go over what we're proposing.
Okay, so the 2 will be,
We're trying to work towards a
Mike,
common
Jeff.
goal. Just fix something.
Mike and Jeff.
I read your lips.
Okay, well, I was accommodating for your hurt ear. I'm half deaf anyway.
About this for all it's worth.
20% on that, in the government.
Me too.
Okay, myself and the major will report in. I'll email that over to town
Yeah.
administrator and let them know. Just like old times at the old BCT.
That's right.
And maybe we'll actually make some progress and get some.
Not maybe, you will.
We absolutely will.
Lay a foundation for, like Cam said, further future stuff.
I think Cam and John are reasonable people.
But you don't know me too well, Tony.
Not yet.
Because I'm
But I
signing
know
up for
pe-
Social
I-
Security in October.
I know people that have you, so.
I've been in town long enough.
All right, old business. Whether by push, by persistence, by, however it came about, we did get something, and the town administrator did see, he emailed everybody, and it's not the greatest format, and apparently he's gonna work on
Yeah, that
laying it out better,
seems
but
pretty
we
clear.
got the information. it looks like interesting reading. So like, you know, time away from the office or something.
Who gets that?
But it did come out, and it is laid out a little funny, but he did admit that it wasn't in the best format for the best user-friendly.
I think
but
his
we do
email,
have it.
I think his email stated that he was going to try to fix that, if I recall.
Well,
Sure, it's
The
on the
format
top.
that you see generally has come from Southwest in the past. I was a little bit dismayed at the fact that these are all old bonds. None of the bands are in there for the school, for the police station, for the, also for the sewerage.
Yeah,
I mean,
it says
none of that was broken out. And I mean, that has a big tax impact on how long are we gonna borrow the money for? They're both debt exclusions. A debt exclusion for the police station, it was initially talked by the administrator for 4 years. I think that in reviewing that back in, we reviewed that, what,
When
back
is
in
that
March?
collected, though?
I think, yeah.
When we
Does it
looked
go
at
on
that,
the tax rolls, or when do we
that-
start getting charged the
I don't know.
dollar?
that amount of money for the police station that was talked about at the, and we used the 1.75%, and I understand this last ban is 2.75, which meant much more money, is we looked at that as, and we used the debt calculator and the tax impact calculator back in like March in this committee, and the tax impact for a 4-year period is quite substantial.
So when does that go on to the tax rate? Does it go on for or 18 that we're in? No, we're in 19 now, I'm sorry. Or does it go on in 20? Because if it doesn't go on in 20, I wouldn't expect to see those numbers until such time that the town is essentially incurring that debt.
Well, you can end up breaking the band out as far as a debt exclusion in anticipation of getting the bond.
Well, but I understand that, but I
Yeah, I don't know if they've hit the debt exclusion or not.
yeah, so if the
I know the
town
first time
essentially
they
isn't,
did.
if the townspeople aren't paying taxes to that amount of money yet, I wouldn't expect them to be
Well,
reporting
they are
it.
paying taxes on it because the band is a short term and it can be redone a couple of times. For that percentage is a substantial amount of money per year that you're paying in just interest. You're not paying off the band.
No, I understand that, but as taxpayers, I thought we didn't start paying on the school loan, the $27 million.
Well, that's the school. I'm talking about like.
But even the police station, was that starting this year?
That's what I'm trying to get clarification on.
Well,
Is,
so that's what I'm asking,
Yeah.
is if we're not paying as part of our tax rate, the 17, whatever it is, I wouldn't expect to see it listed here because you're listing something that doesn't really exist, even though, yes, we borrowed the money, but we don't start paying it until next year.
well, we are paying the interest on the bands. And we're paying 2.75% on $9 million, no matter how you cut it. Whether it's you break it down just so many years, you are paying that every year.
If that's the case, if we are paying it this year, then it should be listed. I would agree with it.
It doesn't say how many years the ban is for,
Okay.
because you can end up doing, on the past things, you could end up doing a ban and then redoing it up to 2 times. Under the Modernization Act, I believe there's no limit. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman? They changed that limit?
You
Yeah, I think
redo
they
it to
can
get
go
lower interest.
They can end up
5
going,
years.
they can go 5
Yeah.
years or plus. So that ban is still, and they basically stated
Maybe they just
it
haven't
was at 2.75%.
It did increase a bit, but it's, I mean, it was voted on. I mean, it's the same old story. If people go to town meeting, you have a chance to ask questions, to get these things
Is it,
dealt with, and as one gentleman told me, people go to town meeting and argue for 4 hours over $5 and vote $10 million at the drop of a hat and
Right.
go home.
that's true.
I mean, we can't force people to ask those questions.
Is it possible that they just haven't produced this document for those two bands?
It's quite
I mean,
possible.
it's
Yeah.
only early August.
It hasn't been, one hasn't been signed yet, it hasn't officially been submitted, it's.
Well,
so
that's
it's
just for the
really,
sewerage.
You know, but, I mean,
The ban itself for the $9 million has been done.
I have a question down to send a question to the town administrator concerning the inclusion of those things in this report. and see
Maybe
what-
this is what he had handy so he could get us something
It's-
and
it's
just forgot
quite
to say,
possible.
hey,
It's, because I've asked several times, and I think this came from Hilltop,
yeah.
which is
Yeah, it does.
formerly First Southwest, and it's not a report from the treasurer per se, so it,
And maybe it's
you know,
what they
it may
have.
be what was available.
Right.
Is,
I mean, at least it's
sometimes-
something.
in a perfect world, yes, things would be one way, but we all know that's not
We don't
so.
live in a perfect world.
Whether we like it, agree with it, it's, sometimes reality just slaps you. Another item under old business, and this goes back a ways. It was actually brought up at the beginning of the year, and we got into the budget season, and we
tabled
said
it.
we will visit this after the budget season, and as often happens, other things come up, and sometimes things do get lost in the shuffle. So this is something that we had talked about and Will had researched a little bit on, and I believe it was if we were gonna vote on some things to put them in place and then get it on the website. And I will let Will speak to this and the next item.
Okay. The advisory roles and responsibilities were, that I sent out was, I started taking some stuff from other communities and rolling it up into that document. I stopped because we had not, at that particular time, it wasn't set as a goal or something that was being looked at to do. I mean, didn't want to take and continue doing something if that's not what the committee wanted. I recommend that we do the roles and responsibilities, because a document like that can be given to new members such as yourself, as well as the other document about the handbook of operating procedures, which end up getting into more detail than the roles and responsibilities. There's any number of communities that have these documents already. It may be questioned, because we were questioned about two years ago about our reserve fund policy when we ended up requesting them the selectmen to take and fill it out, and we had to provide additional documentation from other communities showing that this is not something that, this is not just what Templeton Advisory Committee is suggesting. This is done in every community, and ours was basically geared towards Templeton. And the same thing for both of these documents. They should be geared to what we do, because some of the documents get into a lot more than what we do based upon charter or whatever else. We don't have a charter. Some of those references would have to be taken out. So I'm suggesting that both of these should be something that we look at to end up getting as documentation, and eventually get them on the website for reference. I mean, in 3 years, that doesn't say that any of the members that you see sitting here today are gonna be here. But if there's a document for roles and responsibilities as well as procedure, they have something to go to, as well as the financial handbook. And these two documents Templeton oriented. They can be reviewed every couple of years. That's what a lot of communities do. They actually review a lot of the policies and procedures on a yearly or every other year. So that's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, kind of like a continuity book.
Yep.
Okay.
I agree.
Is that something you want a motion on? To proceed?
I was going to,
Will, would we write that from scratch, or?
I was gonna say.
I've already started.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna
The
suggest-
roles and responsibilities, I already started, and I started some of it, and I stopped, and I said, this is so much of it, and I took some of the other community and showed you what the other community, and only one other community, and that needs to be changed to reflect Templeton's bylaws, et cetera.
Right, I mean, so, I mean, if you're looking for like just a motion to initiate that, I mean, I can offer that, to initiate roles and responsibilities, or as part of a larger handbook of operating procedures, or a advisory committee continuity document.
There would be separate documents.
Okay.
That's my suggestion, anyway.
But you have some of that stuff.
Yep.
I don't know, do you have the email, that file that you sent out?
Yes.
Still?
Yep.
Could you,
Everybody got it.
you got that all?
Yeah, everybody
Wanna
was
put
sent that.
on the, wanna have further discussion at the next meeting, or do you want a motion and vote on it this evening to proceed with that?
To go ahead and proceed,
I mean, I'm looking up the website now. I would say, put it on the agenda for the next meeting, that way we can have something to review.
well, that was already sent out.
Right, but we can actually look at it and say, yeah, I mean, I think we should
Okay.
adopt this. You wanna just put it on the agenda?
Well,
for
it's
next-
not finalized, it was.
Oh, I know.
Right, both the documents were just started as to show you what some of the stuff could be.
Right. So do you want, for the next agenda item, are you looking for feedback?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it like that. So I would put the agenda item as feedback for advisory, the document that'll include the advisory roles and responsibilities.
When was that email? I don't remember. I got
Those were
it.
sent out as part of the possibilities for goals when we had the workshop in that time frame.
Is that the same stuff you sent out? I think it was, last December or January? Was it the same?
That was,
Did you
for
update?
right, one of the communities, I actually sent one of the other communities' documents to everybody.
Okay.
Because there's multiple ones that are from more than one community.
Will, would you have titled it
Is this
roles
it?
and responsibilities?
I think
Yes.
Okay.
It was for,
Yeah, I think so.
review at the workshop, as setting for goals.
It was
And I-
advisory committee documents, was that the name of it?
Yeah, I
I
believe
think
Yeah,
so.
it's,
It's from June,
June 17th.
Okay.
yeah. I think this is it.
Oh, I see it.
and it lists both documents.
There's 8 documents attached to this.
No, that was the 8 documents that we already have. It was after that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was the second.
It was for our meeting, first meeting in July, at the workshop.
Yeah, the second, I think it was the second. The, right around the left of
Yeah, I
Statement
think
of
this-
roles, revision 0.
Yes,
Okay, so that
What's the
was
date of it?
July 4th.
yep. That sounds like about the right date.
All right, at least we got the right document.
Yep. And the other documents also there
Yep.
started,
Operating procedures, yep,
yep.
I see them all.
And that just gives you some flavor as to what
First
would be
statement of roles.
contained in that.
See if I didn't just move that.
I didn't send the other communities had those documents. It was pulling, as you will find out when you go to the Association of Town Finance annual meeting, one of the longstanding members, Alan Tossi, basically says is, Do not create your own from, create the wheel again.
Right.
Plagiarize, plagiarize, plagiarize. Make it pertinent to your community, but there is plenty of documents that they can end up looking at that, no matter what, whether it's a financial policy or for just a finance committee.
I'm trying to find it.
All right, I'll put that on
Yeah,
for agenda item. for
And
the
everyone
next,
knows where it is, so.
Meeting, so everybody can
Okay.
look at that and be updated.
Yep.
You got anything else on that? Will? Is that it? On those two items?
Nope.
All right, is there any other requests for agenda items for our next meeting?
The phone number to
If you
call in.
wanna make a request, you have to be a member of the advisory.
Well, I was gonna say that, next week we have the, actually the year-end financial report from the town accountant, treasurer, and the assistant, and all that. So I was gonna suggest that, if you guys, that would be something you guys wanna discuss, but I would also say that you guys are more than welcome to come to that and listen to and ask questions, I believe, at the same time, so. That will all be
It is on my to-do
What time
list
was
to
that
attend
email
that
in?
meeting.
What
but
date
No,
is
good
that,
point, thank you.
That's, next Wednesday.
1 p.m.
Right.
Yep.
Joyce, you look like you're just having too much fun. So,
I don't have it.
fourth,
It's in my trash, let me see. You said oh, yeah, I do.
There's other stuff I'd suggest, but that's enough for
This
this
one, right?
agenda.
okay.
I was looking for something. Yeah, okay.
Minutes,
I was looking for, he said something.
you're gonna have those
compliance and-
out, you said before Monday, which would be,
I'll try to get them out tomorrow, yeah.
okay, well, yeah.
I mean, I'm on page 3 right now, so,
I'll try to remember
Doing
to
pretty
check
good.
my email to forward them out to everybody.
yeah. Do you want me to send them to you alone, and you'll forward them out, or I can
No, you
certainly?
can send them to
Okay,
everybody.
sure.
it's the 22nd.
Yeah.
That way there, it'll give us a chance to take a review.
I won't have an
before
old
the
man
meeting.
meeting. I'm too busy right now, I'm just, that time of the year.
Yep, no problem.
Any other, and if you don't have anything on the top of your head right now, if you think of something, just email me, an agenda idea.
I need that
I don't
phone
wanna
number.
lose the momentum from for the newsletter, so maybe, I don't know, I mentioned like everyone winds up taken apart or something like that. Like,
But
I
newsletter.
think I mean, your article for the Gardner Times was a great primer.
Gardner Times.
Is that what I said? Is that what I just said? I've been Gardner News. Thanks for catching me on that. But like,
I'm
so
just
if we
honest,
put
yeah.
that, right, if we put that on the next one, and maybe we can assign some stuff out.
Delegating already.
Right.
Damn officers.
Just too bad I'm not.
That's why he was kind.
All right, does anyone have anything they would like to, speak on? What are you laughing at?
Is there any, watching the Laurel View, meeting, is there any consideration that we might have? They talked about the betterment. The betterment basically goes to just them. So, but, Chapter 90 that's a grant from the state.
Yep.
But yeah, it's roads, money to pave the roads that
Right.
legally the town owns.
That's not coming out of our operating budget.
If you want, I can briefly touch upon what happened at Laurel View. So, I'm assuming everybody knows the sequence of events for Laurel View? Okay.
Even further back than that, I'm aware.
Yeah, so it's been, so we had the meeting Tuesday, and there's really a few options, and town council interpreted the law to say, there is really nothing we can do to fix the road using Chapter 90 money. Legally, he feels that the town has no liability to, not eminent domain, I forget what the prescription, which is, you take care of the road for 20 years, it's legally the
Right.
town's road. He went down all those avenues and said that there is really no way that he feels the town would need to accept liability for the condition of the road. So with that being stated, there was a few options kicked out. One is that the town adopts the road outright, Two is that they find a contractor, they fix the road so that they can get it plowed, and then we adopt the road next at the annual town meeting. And the third is in that way, you can either raise a betterment, or the town is going to fix it using Chapter 90 funds. And the third is they maintain private ownership of the road, and there's, you know, we're out of their hair, they're out of our hair, whatever it may be.
We do patches at that point. We wind up just kind of giving them the table scraps of what the bylaw can supply.
So the major concerns of what that brings is Lori Mattson, who sits on the school committee, she also lives on that road, not sits on the road. She had stated that after they had caucus, that they aren't very optimistic that it will be adopted at the town meeting, the fall town meeting, for reasons that it is in the newspapers, that it is in bad condition, and that it would be tough to convince the citizens of Templeton to adopt this road and to eat that cost when you look at the value of all the other roads in the community. I mean, there are a lot of roads in this town that are in poor shape, just as bad, and people would all want some of that money.
It just opens up Pandora's box if you do it for this.
Right.
So what they had said was that they were looking at ways, they're gonna contact some contractors to kind of go down there, assess the road. Carter had stated that he delegated to Mark Shea to kind of get a report of what needs to be fixed in order to be able to be plowing it, to not risk any of the capital items that we have. So they're gonna go down that road, I'm assuming, after the numbers come back for the paving, we'll see what the actual conversation is. And then we're gonna try to get something on there for the annual town meeting to adopt it, once, you know, they make their contribution to fix it up, so that they're willing, and then we'll also assess the full boatload. So I think it will be another topic of discussion coming up in the spring during budget season, absolutely, so. It's definitely something you guys should be aware of, and advise us on what you feel that, you know, the liability and the cost is gonna be to the town.
And there is about $100,000 in property tax collections from that little neighborhood.
Yep.
And I think they have some other options besides what they were given. But,
Yes.
and no, it's not the worst road in town, but again, they are paying taxes. I think it's an average about 4,000 a house down there, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
So, and they're not getting what everyone else gets. For right or wrong, whatever the reason, I mean,
They pay full tax rate?
I
Yeah,
feel for them.
it's based off the assessed value of the home.
Yeah.
And so the assessed value of the home does not take into account that it's a private way or not. When you
Yeah.
assess the value of the house, it's based off what the market's selling at. So normally, if it was a private road and that was taken into account, they would sell for less money. And the argument raised was that they weren't disclosed by the real estate broker or agent who was selling them the house, that it was a private way, which would put the liability on who did not disclose that. I think roughly 20 years, since 1996.
One person in that meeting was saying that they've lived there since '95.
Yeah, and I think that's right when it was opened, was
Right.
95, yeah. Because, I mean, all those homes look like they were built
Right.
relatively.
That was brought, by the way, that was brought up when that development was being initially started, is to end up getting a large enough bond so that if the contractor did pull out, and they did not require, for some reason, they did not the town did not require, whichever board or committee, and there's plenty of blame to go around, as to the large enough bond to take care of this road if something failed, because it's listed as a private road. I mean, the city of Worcester has about the same type of issue. They have much more than just one or two roads like Templeton. They have multiple ones, and I don't know how they address it. And I do know that they do take care of some of those roads in Worcester area, and they're not paved.
Are they on
That's
septic
that's
tanks or
what the
town sewer?
citizens.
Pardon me?
That's what the.
Water and sewer?
I do not believe so. They have a manhole cover, they have a few manhole covers,
Right.
which is for their private runoff and
Exactly,
water and
it's like
stuff. That's-
self-contained.
yeah.
But they're all on septic tanks.
To
and
my knowledge,
wells
yes.
And wells.
So, Will, that's to the point, they've been for years believing, because of the emergency services necessity to clear the road or sand or otherwise, they've been operating under the assumption, especially, they kept making reference to the sign that was changed at the,
Yep.
after the 2005 didn't go to town meeting, but they believed, everyone in their mind was like, oh, and now it's a public way.
Oh.
So they've been operating for years thinking that was the case.
Yep.
And now we're in this crisis where it's very visible for them to say, well, what now? What are you doing for us?
There's shorter roads in town that are in worse shape.
Yeah.
That are private roads. And this has been an ongoing issue in this community for, I can't think of when it hasn't been an issue. If you look back at some of the roads that were never accepted and that were never paved and were asked by those people, those few people on those roads, not as many as this particular, this road, but they were asked if they had the town plow and stuff so that they had access. And the town has always, for whatever reason, bent over backwards to end up being accommodating and plowing and at least taking care of that level of roads to have them
Well, the
being
selectmen
able to,
can
they
do
can
it.
end up getting into those.
I mean, I've been to several meetings where the selectmen, if it's a short road and they ask, the highway department, hey, how much time does this add to your route? And they'll wind up doing that. They can add that stuff, but in the case of Laurel View, they wind up saying, well, you're doing this, so, why not just take us on fully? But the problem is, like Carter had stressed to them, if you go out and get the work done, it's gonna cost you 10 grand. We get the work done, that's gonna be, well, I think he said it was gonna be
About
astronomical.
half a million, and they're looking at somewhere in the ballpark of 200,000 to be.
That same issue was addressed at Cook Pond for Victoria Lane a number of years ago, and they did push back, and because it was almost the same issue, that the town had to take and accept that road, but the contractor did bring the road up to the specifications.
Right.
And this,
Yeah, and the easements weren't accepted in this case,
Yeah.
at least for Laurel View. I wanted to see if the committee had, because it could have potential financial impact.
yes.
The chapter 90, I know that doesn't affect the operating budget, but it becomes a question of priority. Where do they wind up coming on? Do they come back and say, you know what, we're gonna get a citizen petition, and we'll say we'll go to the bottom of the list? We know that. I don't know what they're gonna do. I know that they had that powwow afterwards, but.
Yeah, when they caught us,
Yeah.
that was Lori Matson's, what she got from that was saying, let's get an assessment first, get some numbers, get some relevant facts and figures, and then
Right.
they're leaning on the side, we'll make the minor repairs to get through the winter, and then we'll talk,
Yeah.
once we have the full estimate, because I guess it's gonna need full re-engineering,
Yeah.
which is the big cost. I mean, you gotta hire somebody an engineer to design, and an architect, all that other stuff, and, I mean, if the town does it, we have to pay prevailing wage, which is pretty high, and then if
Right.
they hire a private contractor, it's,
See, one of the things
story, but where does the
that this
money come
town
from?
has not taken a hold of as strongly as it should, is a lot of communities, when you have a contract come in, there's mitigations, that they have to take and end up doing certain things, or they don't come into town.
Yeah.
Pure and simple. And there's been reluctance in the past to do that. For whatever reason, it hasn't happened. I don't know why, but it hasn't happened. And this goes back a lot of years.
Okay.
But it's gotten better.
Thanks for the update.
Some through push and some through law. But yeah, in days gone by, it was,
So I
not
think
much
we should sort of
bonding.
stand on the outside until these meetings are done and a resolution, and then decide whether it's our place to weigh in or not.
I think, on a policy side, we're looking at putting in something in the bylaw and crafting something that addresses that concern that Will had brought up, that historically it's just bad news. To kind of use this as a precedence and fix it. However, if that is to come to fruition, I mean, there may be financial impact. So it's good to be in the know and to kind of follow it and watch it evolve. Does it have any financial impacts as of now and in this budget season? I don't believe so.
It was suggested a number of years ago, when this particular road and some others came up, is to take and end up getting them prepped for water and sewage, as well as bringing the road up to the standard of the community at that particular time. and for whatever, it was never acted upon.
I don't think that they were engaged. I think for a number of years, they had an expectation because of what they saw with their own eyes.
No, I'm
And
saying that.
that amount of time
No.
went away, and now they're out there going, oh my goodness, you know, I thought we were a public way.
No,
Now
I mean,
we're, you know,
I mean,
left holding
I'm
back.
talking about the town setting this up,
Oh.
that they can make a requirement of the contractor on certain things that they have to do in order that they can end up putting that development in.
Right.
I mean, you know,
I agree with you. I think there's culpability, to hand out.
Their responsibility because they bought the property.
Right.
They bought it. That's what you look into before you buy
It's,
it.
I think what they're looking
Not a pretty
for,
house.
what they're looking for is a way out at this point. They're frustrated, and I think that comes through, is a little bit of that culpability. They're frustrated, but they're looking for, what is our town government doing to help out? And I think Carter had a pretty good foot forward to say, here are some solutions I think we can work out. They're impactful more for them, but the town is trying to help out.
Okay,
It definitely does. It's,
thanks, Ken.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for that discussion.
the workshop, we talked about, it was about the bylaw and some more law review and, was there any, you had a school committee meeting last night, was there any budget stuff discussed or at this
So,
point?
there was the executive sessions for the bargaining agreements that I'm part of. From the school committee, I don't think they're really not talking too much about budget stuff now. They're talking more about, kind of common planning, stuff like that, but they're also looking at school choice. And so one of the big things that they're looking at now which is directly impact on finances, for school choice, I believe it's $5,000 per kid that school choice is in.
right?
So you want to drive those numbers up. However, once you accept them, you can't turn them away. So if you accepted 500 in grade 5 and then all of a sudden another 500 fifth graders move to town, you have to accept those 500 fifth graders and you
Is
can't
it a
kick them out.
yearly?
See, the problem with that's in the-
5,000?
Yes, yep. So we have somewhere, I think it's 1,400 kids in the school, and I'm sorry, Dr. Casvan, if you're watching this, I might butcher this, but it's about 250 students at school choice in, which is some good money. There's a list of about 80 kids that want a school choice in that we just don't have the room, and they're a little hesitant to accept. So they had stopped school choice altogether. That was the motion. They stopped it for about a month till September, because they want to look at the numbers and see who's going to fall off the wait list and who's going to, So they're taking some prudent steps. The only other school that's not accepting school choice students was Ash West, and that's for obvious reasons. They're in high demand, so.
Yeah, because there's a time frame, a certain period of time in the spring, I think it's like in June or something, where they can opt out of school choice. You can't stop kids from leaving your school district, but you can opt out of
Right.
accepting kids coming in. And one of the reasons for the elementary school was they don't have the
Packed.
to-
According to Dr. Casvant, they cannot accept another student right now in Baldwinville Elementary School. They have so many kids, and some people have moved to town, and they have children that will be attending that, so they're even looking at an additional 9 kids they have to house there. So the new school, it should alleviate some of that, and they had said that they're actually sending some of the Baldwinville Elementary applicants to Phillipston. They're recommending, hey, if you want to, get into the Narragansett Regional School District, not just the elementary school, Phillipston is accepting
Because
children.
once you take them in,
Yeah.
you've got them.
All the way through the district. Yep.
You can't throw them out.
See, part of the problem with school choice is that you only get 5,000 for a child coming in. And the cost in this community, as you look at the school budget, is anywhere from $11,000 to $13,000 to educate kids. It would be, and this is not gonna happen, it would be better for everybody in this community to take and end up shipping their kids somewhere else for finances of the community, because we would only pay $5,000 going out, and we would save a lot of money for the school. which is, you know, that's ludicrous, but that, I mean, that, if you think about it on that particular
Pretty happy.
premise, you would end up saving a lot of money.
Well, and it's a marginal cost, so there's a utilization cost where if you can house, you know, 14, it's like hospitals. If they can house 1,400 people, they want to be absolutely filled with 1,400 people, because if they don't have that maximum amount of capacity, then they're not making the money that they could be. So that's kind of where you look at it, as what is the maximum operating capacity that Gansett wants to be at without being over capacity down the future, so.
Because school choice helps some communities and it hurts others. And the best scenario would be for the state to properly fund,
Right.
for everybody to properly fund the schools and get all schools academically pretty level, and then people would tend to stay where they're at, and you wouldn't have this buying and selling of kids essentially as a commodity.
So they actually did get some good aid, which is good for the budget season for us, is that they're funding a little bit more of the transportation. I think chapter 70, I forget what section that is, but for the regional transportation. So they're gonna get a little bit, it's nominal dollars to their $6 million budget that we pay for.
That's-
Maybe in
we're
October,
paying-
the October meeting, they will talk about the budget, because if the Montezuma Regional is willing to take it, end up having their budget in, like, in January, already done, and there's a lot of other communities that do that, the school committee needs to take and end up starting that
Funding to
budget
Montezuma.
subcommittee process and the budgeting process earlier than they have in the past.
So they are actually, and that was something that was discussed last night, was that they're actually shifting, and it's tentative, it's not tentative, but it is temporary would be the word. For this year, they're gonna see how it goes by producing the budget about a week earlier than was previous. So they're gonna try to produce that, and they're gonna work with us and try to make sure that we can produce our budgets based off of what their number is a lot earlier. So it makes our budget season a little bit less stressful.
And to cut down on the bad surprises,
Yes.
dollar-wise.
Absolutely.
So, anything else?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
So,
So moved. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody want to stay?
Nope.
Good night. Thank you all for coming.